Cosatu has come out guns blazing. It's slamming the Reserve Bank's decision to hike interest rates by 75 basis points. That is 0.75%. The Federation says this is a gut-wrenching blow to millions of workers drowning in debt and struggling to take care of their families. So let's discuss this further. We are joined now by Cosatu's General Secretary, Bheki Ntshalintshali. A very good morning to you, General Secretary, and thank you so much for your time. What exactly does a 0.75% increase in repo rates mean for the ordinary worker?
Thank you very much and good morning. The interest rate in any way was intended or is intended to cap demand when people are on a buying spree, when people are getting some loans. We put the interest rate as a way of deterrence. But when people are poor and when people are cost of living is very, very high, not based on demand, but almost based on the questions that people can just not afford. It means that the price for everything that they may own goes up. So it's not in the interest of the majority of people. It's not in the interest of the working class. It's only in the interest of those that have the resources to lend to some people. So the banks will be smiling all the way, and the people, whoever you owe, will be happy about this. We, of course, accept that we have to do something, but not to the degree that it has been done. So it's very devastating. It does not give any kind of encouragement to our call, even for the price reduction.
You know, Mr. Ntshalintshali, as you're speaking about this, I'm reminded about the fact that right now we're dealing with a consumer inflation that is at a 13-year high. At the back of this, we're dealing with fuel prices that are further exacerbated by what's happening in the Ukraine as well as Russia. When we're taking a look at whether or not South Africans at this moment can even afford to live, the responsibility on one side of the Reserve Bank is to make sure that obviously austerity measures are put in place so that we can cut down on spending. But I would have thought that, do we not want more money to be circulating in the economy, given where we come from a very tight economic climate during the COVID-19 harder lockdowns? I'm just wondering what the bigger plan is here in being able to institute such austerity measures.
I think you are correct. This is a narrow approach by the Reserve Bank. This is more than the Reserve Bank. I think this is where government has to do some kind of intervention and say, what else can we do? If we were to do this kind of just maintaining the strength of our currency, there has to be other intervention. There has to be an intervention by government, for an example, to increase the social relief grant, or any other intervention looking at the kind of giving more megawatts or some units on the electricity, particularly for the indigent, looking to more about the question of reducing the cost of traveling to and from work, all those. So it can't just be one intervention in the form of the Reserve Bank. The mandate of the Reserve Bank in any way is also to look to question of jobs. What does it mean to companies that are borrowing money to sustain their businesses? It means to us some kind of retrenchment, some kind of reduction of workforce until issues are coming to normal. Those factors that are affecting the inflation that we're talking about, all of them are external. They're not South African. They're not pushed by people going on a buying spree. It's a global, it's external, and therefore it needs some kind of intervention just beyond the question of the Reserve Bank.
If Cosatu is afforded an opportunity to address the Reserve Bank GS, to address government at its highest level, what would Cosatu suggest? What would Cosatu put forward on the table? Because at this point, it's all good and well to sit there and criticize the South African Reserve Bank and the government to point out what it is they're not doing right. But we are at a point as South Africa where we need solutions, where we need suggestions of a way forward. So what would Cosatu put forward on the table for the SARB and the government?
Sometimes inflation in itself, I'm not talking about hyperinflation in these cases. You will allow inflation because you wanted the money to be circulated. You want to give the people an opportunity to buy. And in that processes of people buying, companies may be able to produce more. And if they produce more and there's a lot of competition, we hope that then the prices or the cost of living will be reduced one way or another. That's what we will take to the Reserve Bank. By the way, we have agreed to meet with the Reserve Bank more than often. So we got an agenda with the Reserve Bank. We are meeting on the 4th of August. We'll be tabling what we think are the alternative every time they needed to be looking at this thing. At the core, as part of our understanding of their mandate, is job creation. And the question of just hiking in the manner they've done this time, we think it's worked to the opposite.
Yeah, you know, as you're speaking about this, Mr. Ntshalintshali, I'm wondering about the economic recovery plan that was proposed and accepted at NEDLAC. Does that now then risk being in jeopardy? Because all of that required for South Africans to participate actively in the economy, for markets to be further open, for looking at how, back to this, money circulating in the economy, so that indeed it can increase government spending. Government can then use that for purposes of structural sort of economic recovery. But with this kind of hike, it certainly does put a whole damp and a whole spanner in the works. Does it not risk the very same economic recovery plan that was proposed?
It does. One of the issues that was raised in the economic recovery and construction plan was the mobilization of resources, was also to allow even government itself to be able to borrow and to borrow from the private sectors, because we prefer that the borrowing should be domestic. In other words, you should be borrowing in rands, not in dollar, and go outside. When you put interest rate to this degree, what does it mean in the mobilization of the resources in order to be able, for example, for government to move massive in relations to the infrastructure? We have seen some good sign in relation to the revival of the railway lines around Soweto and elsewhere. So it does in a particular way. The problem is that when one part of government, which in this case is the Reserve Bank, does not consult in a broader way for all the stakeholders and to say we're in crisis, maybe taking what is the impact of the Russia-Ukraine war, what is an approach that everybody can make a contribution to? We think the Reserve Bank, when it comes to some of these issues, should be able to say, we're in trouble. What are your views? In an honest way.
Mr. Ntshalintshali, the ordinary South African is saying we are being told to tighten the belt, we are being told to cut down on our lifestyles and certain expenses, but the ordinary South African is also saying we are being told to cut down on monies that we don't even have. You know, the repo rate is going up, the price of petrol is going up, the basket of groceries is going up, but not my salary. What is the ordinary worker saying? What is a member of Cosatu saying when they are seeing all of these rates going up?
And then you have seen in the last few days, workers are protesting everywhere. They can't even manage to protest during working hours, because if you protest during working hours, it means the time you spend on the protest line will be deducted. So they protest during their spare time. All over the provinces, they are saying the same thing. Remember, these workers that we're referring to, they got now an expanded family. 10 million of people are unemployed. How do they survive? It means those who are working, you have to share your income with every member of the family, because we got a crisis. So there's nothing to tighten. I mean, in this particular case, we're in a crisis. Government needed to intervene, and to intervene urgently. We were moving towards a political instability if we are unable to intervene. And that's a warning we're giving to government. We're on a timing bomb. We need to be moving. And we need to be seen to be moving. So we need to intervene now, otherwise it will be too late.
I need to labour on that point a little bit because it was also during the memorial service of the Deputy Secretary General, the late Jesu Duarte, that even former President Thabo Mbeki, which is also former ANC President, given the tripartite alliance, was, came out and said, listen, open cards here on the table. What was promised during the State of the Nation address by the South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has not come into fruition. And there's a big concern around what exactly you're saying, that this country could turn out with an Arab Spring as we've witnessed in Tunisia. As you're looking at that, does that also put a certain strain on the tripartite alliance, on government's stance, if even the members of the African National Congress, the leaders within the African National Congress, are criticizing the way in which plans that were made did not come to pass at all? And what does that mean actually for your trust in the President Cyril Ramaphosa?
Sometimes what surprises me is that when people are out of government, they are able to point fingers. We're in this crisis that we're in today because the former president or the earlier leaders of our democracy adopted a policy that put us here. They adopted GEAR. They were warned in 1997 about investing in ESCOM so that we can have the question of secure security and be able to attract investment. They refused because their intention was to privatize. So we're bearing the fruits in terms of electricity because of the leaders like President Bheki. So they can't be saviors, they can't be saints. We're in this problem because of them. Of course, they are right to say, what the starting point, though, for them is to say, we mess it up, we ignore the infrastructure, we adopted austerity measures, we did not create jobs. Because the truth to be told, South Africa has never created jobs during this period of 28 years. So, yes, he's correct to say what is coming up. But he should have been going a little bit broader and says, we mess up all of them.
Mr. Ntshalintshali, we will leave it there with you. Thank you so much for joining us here on the South African Morning. That is the General Secretary of Cosatu, Bheki Ntshalintshali.